I hope I will be able to share with you a couple of ideas I've come across on creativity and innovation. So I've been working with really great companies and individuals on trying to increase their creative potentials, whatever that might mean, especially in the problem-solving area when I speak about creativity. So a couple of questions started popping up. One of them is, why aren't we all creative? So, and if we are, is it good? Should we all be creative or not? And the second part is, so if we are creative, which areas of creativity are we concerned about? For example, if you have a child today, you want him or her to be very creative, right? And this is what our society is really valuing these days. But imagine yourselves in like 60 years from now, when you're 80 years old, and you need a heart surgery. And this child of yours is a heart surgeon. Do you want him or her to still be creative? So he or she is supposed to do an open heart surgery on you, and you hope for him or her to do a routine task. You would rather go to somebody who is a routinely good doctor than the most creative doctor in the world. So in the sense, we have started really valuing creativity without really asking ourselves, what is creativity? Why are we all creative? Should we all be creative? And if we should be all creative, how do we achieve the maximum of our own creativity? So what I'd like to go through is a couple of assumptions and a couple of ideas about creativity that we take for granted. So number one is that creativity implies thinking outside the box. How many of us, I think all of us think this is true, right? But the truth of the matter is that actually our brain requires a box. Even though we have a shiny box, for some reason we think that creativity is only to get out of the box. And if we look at the brain and how it functions, actually brain needs some constraint, needs to work in a certain set of frame of reference. So we can be really creative within the box. We do not need to get out of the box. That is one important misconception about our brains. Secondly, when we think about thinking outside the box, we actually end up doing random things, random ideas, which are never good. Or never good enough, because an idea is only good in a certain context, again, in a certain box. An idea which is amazing for a certain type of context might be a terrible idea in another, and vice versa. So we have started growing our creativity by forcing ourselves to think outside the box. What we should be doing is actually something completely different. Let's do this short task. Everybody can do it here or at home or whatever. So how many of you have seen this assignment before? Just raise your hand really quickly. Okay, perfect, about half of you. So this is the first task. Link these dots with 5 straight connected lines without raising a pencil. Just do it in your mind. I'll give you 2 seconds to do it. The answer is very simple. It's this one. Those of you who have seen the task had problems solving this problem. Why? Because you were taught to do it differently. You saw it be done differently, and it's actually a very simple task. Those of us who didn't see similar tasks before did it better. It was like an obvious solution. Now, if you try to do it with 4 lines, what happens then? So those of you who saw the task before, you know that with 4 lines, you should get out of the box, right? And then it's easy solution. You had a problem solving it in the first case because you were trying to get out of the box, although there was no need to get out of the box. Now this one is easier for you, and for those who didn't see it before, they couldn't get out of the box, whatever that might be. If I ask you to try to link it with 3 straight lines without raising your pencil, how many of you have seen this task? Can you come up with a solution? Very few could, probably. It's all about getting even more outside the box. Now, can you do it with 1 straight line? Connect these 3. Now, all of a sudden, your brains make sense. Look, if I make a thicker line, it's easier. And if I ask you if you can do it with 1 dot, your brains say what? Of course. It's a matter of how big is the dot, right? So all of a sudden, your brains see the result that actually these dots can be connected with just 1 dot. But even though they're becoming quote-unquote creative, although the question is whether this means really creativity or we've just learned to do routinely creative tasks, There are other solutions to this problem. If you were supposed to link it all with one line, the idea is you can fold a paper and make an infinite line which connects billions of dots, all the dots in the world on that paper. With one dot, you can also look at, all of us are now looking in a different box, which is like, okay, I can make a line thicker. But very few of you thought of the idea that you can fold a paper and just push one dot through all these dots if you line them up one under the other. So our brains are constantly in a box. They cannot work outside the box. The question is just, what is the box? And it is really weird that what we try to do constantly is to think outside the box, but we never stop and define the box. How many of you have ever stopped and said, look, before I go and think outside the box, let me think, what am I thinking within? What are the boxes that my brain is framed with, right? So this is the main idea about creativity, about the first assumption. We do not need to think outside the box. We cannot think outside the box. But we have to be sure which boxes are we thinking within. And as you can see, I can easily manage your boxes, change them. All of a sudden, certain results, certain creative, quote-unquote, results seem really intuitive. But they're actually just another box which I put in your brains. So what I would like for us to kind of do in the future is just to stop and think, what is the box? Meaning, what are the components within the box and how are they linked? What are the principles guiding this box that we're living in? Second part of the story, again, you never get out of the box. Sometimes you can shoot an idea here and there outside the box. But the idea is to be really creative. The goal is to have a box to create a new box, which is completely different. So again, let me just repeat this. So the idea is we try to think outside the box, but actually we should always be thinking in the boxes because our brains work in that way. Our ideas make sense only within a certain reference frame. So what we can do, we can be either innovative within an existing box, or we can create a new box within which the new industry, the new rules will be played, the new set of actors will be working. What we tend to believe that these guys who come up with new boxes are the most creative guys. Those who think within these boxes tend to be less creative. Again, I go back to the question, should we all be extremely creative? Or is it good that there are different levels of creativity that we are all operating in? So, second thing, if we now agree to an extent that thinking outside the box is sort of hard and impossible, an assumption is that everybody is creative, that everybody has a creative brain. Now, the truth is that actually creativity implies deceiving your brain. None of our brains, well, most of our brains are not creative by themselves. We have to force them in a way to be creative. Why is that so? Well, first of all, there's this story of evolution, to the extent that you believe in evolution. Charles Darwin said that the evolution is all about survival of the fittest. It is not survival of the most creative. It is not the survival of the smartest. It is the fittest, meaning those who are able to most quickly and best adapt to the environment. So through a couple of millions of years, the brains that we have in our head, which have been developed, are the ones who adapt to the environment, not change the environment. Here and there you have a lunatic who changes the environment, comes up with fire, comes up with farming, and then it changes the world. It's a new box we live in. But most of us actually, just imagine yourselves, you have a lion a million years ago running toward you. The brain which would say like, okay, let me stop and think about how to creatively solve this problem would be dead. It wouldn't pass on the genes for this creative brain. The one who survives is who just automatically reacts and runs, right? So this is the brain which has been developing in our head for millions of years. Now, if you've managed to avoid evolution, you come into the educational system, right? So in the educational system, we focus on the content. We want everybody to be the same to get a certain degree. We don't focus on how individuals' brains work. We don't focus on understanding how they can work differently, what they're good at, what they're bad at, and how to stimulate what they should be excelled at. Other thing is, we focus on developing specialists. We focus on coming up with the idea that somebody should be really specialized in being the best at something. But we forget about that somebody can be the best at creativity, that somebody can be the best at being creative, regardless of the area. And when you look at the great thinkers of the past, like Da Vinci, he contributed to invention, painting, sculpturing, architecture, science, music. When you look at his biography, there's more things he did than he didn't do, right? And if you imagine that I come to you to the stage and say, look, I'm really good in botanist, I'm also good in marketing, I'm also good in architecture, you would think I'm crazy, right? You wouldn't take me seriously. But the idea is all of the great innovators, great creative people in the past had actually really, really broad, non-specialized education. This specialization of education actually came from the idea of Industrial Revolution a couple of hundred years ago, where we said, look, there are these things that we should do, and we should specialize so that everyone is the best at what he or she does, and as a result, the whole system would be better. Now, the more creative work is coming into play, the less we know what we should be doing, and the less we know how really to do it. So, apart from specialization, we want to get people to repeat, not to discover in schools. So what does it mean? Can you imagine a couple of hundred years ago if I was teaching students saying, look, the sun revolves around the earth, and then Copernicus or whoever comes up and says, no, 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 I think differently. I think it is the earth who goes around the sun. He would fail my course and never finish school, right? So we stimulate people to accept what they're told rather than to question what they're told. And as a result, we operate, the whole educational system operates under two important and untrue assumptions. Number one, that we know what students should do, that we know what they should be doing today, let alone 5 years from now when they graduate, or 20 years from now when they finish, if they start just with primary school. And second thing, that we know how best to do it. If we know what to do and how best to do it, then yes, then it's good to routinize these behaviors and specialize these people. But this is rarely the case. So we should be training people to continuously diverge and converge on different ideas. Provide them enough breadth of knowledge so that their brain can process enough information in order to make creative solutions. So the brain that we have in our heads through evolution is a brain which, what I found the best definition is optimizing mechanism. It doesn't do things to make the best decision. It optimizes usage of oxygen and sugars, which is energy, in order to come up with a solution. This is why in most cases it tries to come up with an automatic solution, routinized answer to a problem, not a creative one. Because if you think about it, the brain is up there, so the gravity is working against the blood coming to the brain. And in order for the brain to work, it needs blood, right? Other thing is that our body has muscles which tend to keep blood in certain places and pump it. There's no muscles in the head. So the way our body learned to manage with it is to tilt our head in the direction of where the brain needs more oxygen and sugar, meaning more energy. So if you were to be asked a really hard question, all of us would look somewhere up there to get more blood in this area of the brain. If you look at all the sculptures of the great thinkers, all of them are leaning forward because this area of the brain is for this type of analytical decision making. This part here actually processes information in a sort of idle way. So this part works with what it knows and tries to combine it in a different way. So just by tilting our head, our brain manages the blood left or right, up and down in order to make better decisions. Of course, it tries to help the body and to use the minimum amount of energy, which means to be non-creative. So if the school didn't kill the creativity in us, then we go to work. And the work works in a way that we first define the role and then get somebody who is the best marketing person, the best finance person for the job, etc. We never get somebody who is the best exploratory thinker or a best exploitative person, and then put them into marketing or finance. And this is actually what should be done in HR. When we think about hiring people, we should first understand how their brains naturally work, and then we can get them to the right jobs or right positions. They can easily learn these things on their own. The problem is, if we put them in so that they execute a certain task, like marketing, finance, etc., it's really hard to force them later, look, why aren't you creative in your job? Well, because that's the person you hired. So we forget that hiring a creative person means that this person can be creative in any area of the world, in any discipline in the company. It is just the way the brain innately, naturally functions. So do we all have the same kind of brain capacity for innovation and creativity? The answer is we all can be creative, but not in the same way. If you think about the runners, we all can run, but there is only one Usain Bolt who has the talent for it. In the same way, we can all be creative, but there are some people whose brain just function in a creative way, whose brain are born for them to be creative. And these are the people who, if you give them non-creative jobs, they become really unsatisfied and underperform. If you give them creative jobs, they achieve wonders. Third assumption that we often think about is that creativity is about an idea. Not an idea, the idea. And we are very protective about our ideas. We try to kind of keep them to ourselves. Well, the truth for the matter is that it's not about one idea. It's about creating a universe of ideas, creating a new box which automatically gives you millions of ideas for how to innovate. So let's use an example of a toothpaste. If you think about toothpaste, how can you increase the sales of toothpaste creatively? Well, you can change the taste, you can change the function, etc. Get more people to use it, use them more often, brush all day long, and all these things. But if you think about it in a structured way, then you can come up with a formula for revenue, where actually you're not selling toothpaste, you're selling small cylinders. And if you know the volume formula for the cylinder, then you know that you can increase R, which is R squared. Pi is relatively a constant, at least for today. And H can be managed in a cylinder. So what are the logical things that you can innovate? You can change the radius or the diameter of the tube just from this little formula, and you can also change the length of the toothbrush to make people use more every time they use. Now, if you develop this formula further, then you actually see that it's actually a whole set of ideas that automatically pop out of this simple formula. And while it is not about one idea, it is about creating a framework within which ideas can be creative. So, just to sum up, creativity does not imply thinking outside the box. It implies knowing what the box is, basically. Everyone has a creative brain to a certain extent. Not all of us are equally creative. Some are innately more creative than the others, and those should be really put into positions to explore their creativity further. And creativity is not just about getting the idea, because if you get the idea, it can be stolen and there is no fruit to it. It is actually about creating a system which then throws out a million of ideas. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope we managed to uncover the idea of why aren't we all creative. Thanks a lot.